The desert did not forgive, and it never forgot. By the time the wind began to howl across the cracked earth, Elias Crow had already buried his past beneath it. At least, that's what he had told himself. The sun hung low, bleeding red across the horizon, and the sand shimmered like a restless sea. Somewhere far behind him lay the ruins of a life that had once meant something. Ahead of him, there was only dust, silence, and revenge. Elias rode alone. His horse, a lean ash-gray stallion named Viper, moved with the steady rhythm of a creature that understood survival better than comfort. They had traveled together long enough that words were unnecessary. The desert spoke in harsher ways, through thirst, through heat, through the whispering ghosts carried on the wind. Elias adjusted the brim of his worn hat, his sharp eyes fixed on the distant silhouette of a settlement barely visible through the haze. Red Hollow. Even the name tasted bitter. 5 years ago, it had been home. 5 years ago, it had been where everything was taken from him. The wind picked up, dragging grains of sand across his face like needles. He didn't flinch. Pain was something he had learned to carry quietly, like a second shadow. "They're still there," he muttered under his breath. "They never leave. Men like them don't run, they rot." The memory came uninvited. Flames rising against the night sky. Screams swallowed by gunfire. And the sound, always the sound, of laughter. Elias tightened his grip on the reins. The black vultures. They weren't just outlaws. They were a plague that spread through towns, draining them of life and leaving only bones behind. Led by a man named Victor Hale, they had carved their name into the desert with blood and fire. And Elias Crow had once been one of them. The thought twisted in his chest like a blade. He hadn't always been a man chasing ghosts. There had been a time when he believed in loyalty, in brotherhood. Victor Hale had been more than a leader, he had been a mentor. A man who could turn words into weapons and loyalty into chains. But that night, Elias closed his eyes briefly, the image burned into him. A house engulfed in flames. A woman standing in the doorway, her face lit by firelight, fearful, pleading. Mara, his wife. He had been too late. He was always too late. A sudden gust of wind snapped him back to the present. Viper shifted beneath him, uneasy. "We're close," Elias said softly, patting the horse's neck. "Smell it, don't you?" Trouble. The outskirts of Red Hollow appeared slowly, like a mirage becoming real. Broken fences, abandoned wagons, and buildings leaning like old men who had given up standing straight. But there was life here, he could feel it. Not the kind that brought warmth. The kind that watched from the shadows. Elias dismounted just beyond the town's edge, tying Viper to a splintered post. His boots sank slightly into the sand as he walked forward, his hand hovering near the grip of his revolver. The town was quiet, too quiet. A door creaked somewhere, a curtain shifted, eyes followed him, but no one spoke. He stepped into the main street, his presence cutting through the silence like a blade. "I didn't come for you," Elias said, his voice low but carrying. "So don't make the mistake of standing in my way." For a moment, nothing happened. Then a voice called out from the shadows. "Well, I'll be damned." A man stepped forward, his face lined with age and suspicion. He wore a sheriff's badge, though it looked more like a relic than a symbol of authority. "Elias Crow," the man said slowly. "Thought you were dead." "Not yet," Elias replied. The sheriff studied him carefully. "You've got nerve coming back here." "I've got unfinished business." The old man sighed. "Then you're a fool. Hale still runs this place. More men than before. Meaner, too." Elias's eyes hardened. "Good. I'd hate for it to be easy." The sheriff shook his head. "You don't understand. This ain't revenge you're walking into. This is suicide." Elias stepped closer, his voice dropping to a cold whisper. "Same thing." The sheriff held his gaze for a long moment before stepping aside. "They're at the saloon," he said quietly. "Same as always. Drinking like kings on stolen gold." Elias nodded once. "Then I know where to start." The saloon doors swung open with a loud creak, breaking the uneasy silence. Inside, the air was thick with smoke, sweat, and laughter. Men crowded around tables, cards and whiskey flowing freely. At the center of it all sat Victor Hale. He hadn't changed, still dressed in black, still carrying himself like a man who believed the world belonged to him. His sharp eyes flicked toward the door the moment Elias entered. For a heartbeat, the room froze. Then Victor smiled. Well, look what the desert dragged back. Elias stepped forward, each footfall echoing. I told you, he said evenly, I'd come back. Victor leaned back in his chair, amused. You said a lot of things, Crow. Most of them ended in you running. A ripple of laughter spread through the room. Elias didn't react. Stand up, he said. The laughter faded. Victor's smile didn't. And if I don't? Elias's hand moved slightly, just enough to rest on his gun. Then I'll drag you up myself. The tension snapped tight. For a moment, it felt like the entire world was holding its breath. Then Victor stood. Chairs scraped. Men shifted. Hands hovered near holsters. Victor raised a hand, stopping them. No, he said calmly. This one's mine. He stepped forward, his boots slow and deliberate. You should have stayed dead, Elias, he said quietly. Not before I finish what you started. Victor's eyes darkened. You think this is about your little tragedy? Your wife. Elias's jaw tightened. You killed her. Victor tilted his head slightly. No, you did. The words hit like a gunshot. You left her alone, Victor continued. You chose to walk away. Choices have consequences. Elias drew his gun in a flash. Victor was faster. 2 shots rang out, deafening in the enclosed space. For a moment, nothing moved. Then blood hit the floor. But it wasn't Elias's. Victor staggered back, a look of shock crossing his face as he clutched his chest. Elias stood firm, smoke rising from his revolver. The room erupted. Gunfire exploded in every direction. Elias moved like a storm, his shots precise, relentless. Men fell before they could even react. Glass shattered. Tables overturned. Chaos swallowed the saloon. Elias fought through it all, his focus locked on one thing, Victor. The man stumbled toward the back door, leaving a trail of blood. Elias followed. The night air hit him as he stepped outside, the chaos behind him fading into distant echoes. Victor collapsed against the wall, his strength finally giving out. Elias approached slowly. It's over, he said. Victor laughed weakly, blood staining his lips. You think killing me changes anything? He rasped. The desert always takes its due. Elias crouched down, his eyes cold. This isn't for the desert. He raised his gun. This is for her. The final shot echoed into the night. Silence followed. The wind returned, sweeping through Red Hollow as if reclaiming it. Elias stood there for a long moment, staring at the body. 5 years of pain. 5 years of chasing ghosts. And now, nothing. No relief. No peace. Just emptiness. He holstered his gun and turned away. Viper waited where he had left him, calm as ever. Elias mounted up, casting one last glance at the town. Red Hollow would survive, places like it always did. But he wouldn't stay to see it. With a gentle kick, Viper began to move. The desert stretched out before them once more, endless, unforgiving. But for the first time in years, Elias wasn't chasing anything. The wind howled at his back as he rode into the darkness, leaving behind the ashes of revenge. And somewhere, far beyond the horizon, the desert kept its secrets, waiting for the next story to be written in dust and blood. The bullet that waited 10 years. The first time Daniel Rourke pulled the trigger, he was too young to understand what death meant. The second time, he made sure he did. The desert town of Hollow Creek had long forgotten the massacre. Time had buried it under dust, silence, and lies. But Daniel hadn't forgotten. He carried it with him. Every sunrise, every sleepless night, every scar that refused to fade. 10 years ago, a gang led by a man called Elias Vance rode into his family's ranch. They didn't come for gold. They came for control. And when Daniel's father refused to sign over his land, they burned everything. Daniel survived by hiding beneath the floorboards while his world burned above him. He still remembered the boots stopping just inches from his face. He still remembered the voice. Leave the boy. Let him grow up with it. That voice had shaped his life. Now, 10 years later, Daniel rode back into Hollow Creek, not as a boy, but as something far more dangerous. A man with patience. A man with a list. One by one, he tracked them down. Not in a rush, not in anger, in precision. The first man died in a quiet stable, never even seeing Daniel's face. The second begged for mercy in a rainstorm. The third tried to run, and learned that the desert always wins. But Daniel wasn't just killing men. He was sending a message. Each body carried the same mark, a single bullet placed over the heart, left untouched. A promise. By the time fear spread through the region, Elias Vance already knew who was coming. And he was waiting. The final confrontation came at sunset, just like the day it all began. The sky burned orange as the two men faced each other across the empty street. "You took your time," Silas said. Daniel's voice was steady. "I wanted you to feel it." "The waiting." Silas smirked. "Revenge don't heal anything, boy." Daniel raised his gun. "No, but it ends things. One shot, one truth. Some bullets don't just kill. They wait." 2. The widow who hunted the storm. No one believed she would survive the first night. When the raiders came, they took everything: her husband, her home, her name. They left her in the desert with nothing but blood on her hands and a sky full of indifferent stars. They should have finished the job. Because the woman they left behind wasn't the one who stood up the next morning. Her name was Eliza Kane. And she became something else. The desert hardened her, taught her how to track, how to shoot, how to disappear. She learned to read footprints like stories and winds like warnings. She stopped being prey. She became the hunt. The gang that destroyed her life called themselves the Storm Riders. They believed they were unstoppable. Until their men started disappearing. No gunfights. No warnings. Just silence. One man vanished near a canyon. His horse returned without him. Another was found days later, buried up to his neck in sand, eyes wide with terror. A third was dragged into the darkness, his screams carried for miles before they were swallowed whole. They began to whisper her name like a curse. The widow. By the time they realized the truth, it was too late. Eliza didn't fight like a gunslinger. She fought like the desert itself. Relentless, unseen, unforgiving. The final man, their leader, tried to run when he saw her standing in the middle of a sandstorm. A ghost wrapped in dust. "You should have died that night," he shouted. Eliza stepped forward, her eyes cold as the wind. "I did." Her shot was swallowed by thunder. When the storm passed, there was nothing left of him. Only the desert, and the legend of a woman who turned grief into vengeance. 3. The last train to Black Ridge. The train wasn't supposed to stop. Not in the middle of nowhere. Not in the dead of night. But when it did, everyone on board felt it, the shift in the air. The kind that meant something was about to go very, very wrong. Jacob Hale sat quietly near the back, his hat low, his face hidden. To everyone else, he was just another passenger. But Jacob wasn't traveling. He was hunting. Years ago, 5 men robbed a train and killed everyone who stood in their way, including Jacob's younger brother. They vanished without a trace, taking the gold, and the truth with them. But Jacob found them, all of them, and tonight, they were all on this train. They didn't know it yet. But this ride had only one destination. The first man died when the lights went out. The second never made it past the dining car. Panic spread quickly. Passengers screamed. Doors slammed. Shadows moved where they shouldn't. The remaining 3 realized what was happening. And who was behind it? Jacob Hale. One of them whispered, his voice shaking. A voice answered from the darkness. "You should have left him alive." The train became a battlefield. Tight corridors, flickering lanterns, nowhere to run. Every step could be your last. Every shadow could be him. One by one, they fell. Until only one remained. The leader. He made his stand at the front of the train, gun trembling in his hand. "You think this brings him back?" he shouted. Jacob stepped into the light. "No." He raised his weapon. "But it brings you to him." The train roared into the night as the final shot echoed through the steel walls. When it reached Black Ridge, only one man stepped off. And he carried nothing with him. Not even his past.